You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
All right, we're going to open up the meeting of the Board of Finance for Thursday, March 23rd, 2023. And before we continue the public hearings for the budget process, we're going to, item number one is some business with regards to act on the opening accounts for the tax office to implement lockbox at Webster Bank. We have the tax collector and Finance Director Finch to comment on this. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, Bob.
So the tax collector office is seeking the board's approval to establish a new bank account relationship for both tax and sewer lockbox payment processing with Webster Bank. Currently, our municipal banking relationship in lockbox is with Bank of America. And following our recent tax cycle, the tax office evaluated our experience with our lockbox vendor, their levels, and found it necessary to explore other options. The tax office researched other payment processing providers within that space and invited those vendors in and gave them an opportunity to tell us about their services. After reviewing the proposals from these vendors, we selected Webster Bank to hopefully be our next vendor or take over from Bank of America. Currently, Webster Bank has about 200 municipal clients. There's 169 towns. However, within that, they are doing WPCA work and other collection work in the lockbox space for those municipalities. So some of the reasons why I would want to change this is the slowness of the payments, so they're going to lockbox, and it's taking them 30 days in some cases to post the payment. So what that does within the tax office, you can imagine, those folks are making their payments and they're looking for their checks to clear within 4 or 5 days. It's taking them 25 days plus to have that happen. We're also seeing payments that are being misposted or lost or out of balance with the lockbox. So we wanted to, and again, how we ended up with B of A, again, because there are our main vendor on the banking side, and through the COVID process and through one of the items that was mentioned in one of the audits, they thought it would be helpful if we used a lockbox. So it was a natural progression to go with Bank of America. So we didn't have a lot of time to look at other vendors. So we did look at 2 other vendors in that space. One of the other things that's a positive in this is that the box will be a Connecticut address versus a Boston address. We have many people call in and say, why am I sending my payments to Boston? So it will also help us with that. So with that, I respectfully request that we open this account with Webster Bank.
Sure, thanks. Questions from the board?
Hey, Bob, just kind of curious, do we use Webster for any other accounts?
I think we have a relationship, Jim.
It's a small relationship. I believe we have a couple of the small cities programs accounts with them, and in the past we have done some investments with them.
I'm fine with it.
Victor, do you have a question?
Yeah, Bob, did this generate late charges for people, this lateness of posting?
With some, yes. So as long, again, we had to go back, and then what we do in the lockbox, we also get a copy back of the envelope that went to the lockbox, so we have a postmark date. We go by the postmark date.
Okay.
But it just generates a lot of
work.
calls into the tax office, and again, it doesn't look like we're very efficient in how we're handling the payments.
I understand.
Bob, what's the cost and what's the anticipated quantity of usage?
We print up about 46,000 bills, and another 10,000 that would go through the sewer payment. And Jim has a formula that he uses.
Well, some are paid by the banks, right?
Well,
The mortgages, the tax-
somewhat, basically,
some are paid-
yeah, there's a whole menu of different fees, which both Bank of America and Webster did have. Our arrangement with this is a compensating balance,
Okay.
so we would basically keep, $3 million in Webster Bank, so the money that would be in Bank of America would go to Webster. The other thing, Bob did mention this, but I think was another factor in this is, as Bob mentioned, we're also expanding the lockbox for sewer payments.
Correct.
And the sewer utility payments. And so, knowing that we had some hiccups and some challenges with the current vendor, to expand that and to another, collection area, it seemed to make sense to look at other places. And I think you had called a number of tax offices as well on this, so.
Yeah, we did reach out to other tax collectors that are using Webster and reported back that they had a great experience with them. They were very
Great, thanks.
satisfied
Questions
with it.
from the board, additional questions?
Joe, I'll move it, please.
Jeff, go ahead.
No, I'll move
Oh,
it.
you moved it? Thank you. Motion's been made,
I'll second it.
seconded by Victor. Additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
You're all set, Bob.
Thank you.
Good luck. Okay, next on the agenda is to continue the public hearings for the fiscal 23-24 budget. And before we start with the Shoreline Adult Education presentation, I just want to provide an overview of the entire budget request, which totals $135,173,946, an overall increase of 8.3%, which represents the request from the Board of Ed and the town, and debt service and capital items. That would result after revenues for a net to be raised from taxation of $118,492,000. Right now, we have an estimated grand list of $3,879,790,000, and that would represent a 31.27 mill rate, or an increase of 1.8 mils. The Board of Ed has requested a 5.8% increase, and the overall town request is at a 8.1, including debt service. So as I've mentioned in the past, we deliberate, tonight's the last part of our public hearings. The board will then deliberate on their own. They will meet on Monday. We will cut the budget and recommend a budget not to exceed to the RTM. They will conduct their committee hearings and then return to us a budget, and we will reconvene in May and set the mill rate and finalize the revenues so that the tax collector can send out the tax bills in June and pay for all the services that we provide, as well as the Board of Ed expenditures. So with that, we'll start with Shoreline Adult Ed on page 62. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Christine Bjork. I'm the program facilitator for Shoreline Adult Education. Shoreline Adult Education offers educational and enriching classes and programs for adults in the community. Next year, we are proposing the same overall budget as we had this year. That's $71,600. You will notice some changes. Postage has been separated out from advertising, printing, and binding. And you'll also notice there's a slight increase to both of those lines to account for the increase in postage and the cost of paper. And we decreased travel, and we decreased membership conferences and meetings. based on what we know from this year. So overall, it is the same budget for next year that we're proposing.
Thanks, Christine. Again, this is a self-funding budget with revenues coming from tuition for the same amount of $71,600. Are there questions from the board on this budget? Questions from the audience? With that, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is school-age childcare on page 63. Welcome.
Well, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Charles Chicarella. I'm the Director of Student Services for the Board of Education. One of my responsibilities is to support our Family Resource Center, and a component of our Family Resource Center is our school-age child care program. Ms. Ariana Loyola is our new interim director of our FRC program, and as a result of that is overseeing our school-age child care component. About a year ago, we were here, and it was Kimberly Cellini who was here and presenting with me, but now we have Ariana, who's doing a phenomenal job. As you know, the school-age child care offers child care supports to our families in Branford. There are a number of components and locations to that, but I don't want to steal Ariana's thunder. She has such a command of this. She can quickly speak to, in a summarized way, what school-age child care offers to the town, to our families, and how the budget was developed. And just to kind of preempt it, it is a self-funded program.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yes, so I've moved into this role as of November. SAC is a school-age childcare program that provides the service to families, a safe, nurturing, high-quality environment for the children. We now also provide a wraparound service for pre-K children, ages 4 to 5. That has also been added to our budget. This program aligns with our Branford Public School Pre-K-4 programs. Those are half-day programs. So the wraparound provides an extended care for those families who need the full-day care, childcare. We also are able to provide summer camp for school-age childcare, and we're hoping in the future that we'd be able to provide pre-K summer camp for those families who are also in the 10-month BPS pre-K programs. So if you notice here, our salary line has been increased. That is because we have hired more staff for the wraparound program to be able to fulfill those needs and maintain the ratios. We also have included the summer staffing in that line as well. Our instructional supplies have also been increased. That's to be able to provide our summer supplies. We've also taken into account on a lot of our line items Connecticut's inflation rate, so that's another reason why they've been increased. Our meals line has been increased. In the past, it has been higher, as high as $15,000, but we brought it up to $7,000, as this year we've noticed that we do not have enough money to last us until July. We also increased our office supplies line because, again, we are in a deficit with that line item right now. We don't have enough money to last us until July, so we did increase it for the next fiscal year.
So we met with our Office of Early Childhood from the state of Connecticut today just to have a conversation, and our rates for families are very competitive, if not actually a little bit low. And so this budget really represents a way to enhance all the services that we're offering through our school-age child care program to really deepen our staff's growth, to enhance all the experiences for the kids. And again, it's self-funded, and we're looking at revenue of approximately $511,000 against those expenses. The increases are tied to, all of the increases that we are functionally seeing in all the budgets relative to the inflation rates and the functional costs.
So you have a new line item for janitorial? That's a
Yes,
new allocation?
it is. That's the payment that school-age childcare is in our schools, and there are cleaning services that our janitors provide.
So it's an
And like,
allocation,
It's an
on
allocation
this
back
one.
into the district for that service.
Got it.
It's a proportional share cost.
Sure. Okay. Questions from the board?
How many students are enrolled?
We have around 130 families enrolled right now between all 4 sites.
4 sites.
Yes.
Is it families, meaning it could be multiple children?
It is multiple children, yes.
So how many children? do
How
you
many
have,
children?
roughly?
Roughly, I would say about 150.
Yeah.
Most have siblings, 1 or 2 siblings.
Okay, thank you.
Charlie?
Do I understand it's just 4 to 5-year-olds?
For our pre-K wraparound SAC program, yes, it is 4 to 5-year-olds. For our school-age childcare, that goes from K through 5.
K through 5?
Yes.
And you have 4 sites?
We have India Next School, Sliney, Murphy, and Tisco.
Okay, thanks.
And what's the population of the K through 5?
Say that again?
What's the number of children for K through 5?
K through 5, around, we have 20 wraparound, so about 130.
Yeah, say 135. Yeah.
So you have 130 under, for the wraparound.
For our wraparound, it's 20.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Thank you. Other questions? Questions from the audience? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Willoughby Wallace Memorial Library on page 52. Good evening, Alice.
Good evening, hi. Alice Pence, the Library Director at Willoughby Wallace Library in Stony Creek. The library provides services and programs and space for children, teens, and adults. We're open 7 days a week now, so we're busy. Some of the highlights for this year, in the non-personnel section, the line items that are provided are services that are provided through Lion, we're part of the Lion Consortium with like 37 other libraries, and those are the delivery service, the library automation, those cover those amounts, those budget numbers are produced by Lion based on our size and how many computers that they provide and service for us. So each library has a different amount that we contribute, and we pay for the delivery service, the cataloging and circulation service, the web version of the catalog, and Overdrive, the e-books. So those are all budgeted by Lion, so those are amounts that are given to us for each year for the budget. In the personnel section, and anyway, the non-personnel, there's a 3.3 and a 3% increase there. In the personnel section, the library staff budget is up 5.5% as we tried to address bringing the part-time workers up above minimum wage. We compared the minimum wage increases for the last 10 years, and they went up substantially for minimum wage, but not for the library staff. So we just tried to get them up above minimum wage. And this year, a big highlight for me in the library is we hired 2 part-time library staff who have just like hit the ground running with services for children and helping with our local history collection, and just increased attendance to a lot of events at the library, especially the children's events. It's almost a toddler Woodstock down there on Mondays and Friday mornings. Very busy. I think that kind of covers the changes in the budget this year.
Okay, questions from the board?
Well, so
Charlie?
we used to get some activity on On passports, is that still going on?
Yes, I have numbers for you. We've been very busy with passports. January, we did 29, and February was 36, which might be a record. I didn't check, some of the previous years with COVID and stuff, we didn't do as many, but I think 36 a month is quite a few. So far in March, it's slowed down, it's 8, because actually the State Department is slowing down processing them too. But yes, and also people are checking out a lot of travel books too, so it's.
How much revenue does that bring in?
It's $35 per passport.
35 per application?
Yeah. I checked the budget numbers for this year. I had budgeted 6,000 and we're at 3,450 brought in for this year so far.
Thank
It
you.
usually continues through the spring with people planning the summer and their fall trips.
Thank you.
Other questions from the board?
Yep. Are you open all day Sunday now, or?
1 to 4,
1 to
but
4?
all year long.
Oh, good.
We used to just be open from the fall to May, and we're trying an experiment of being open all year long. Because Sundays are a real family time to come to the library, and we started offering monthly concerts too.
Thank you.
Nice, yeah. Okay, other questions from the board? All set? Questions from the audience? Okay, I think you're all set, Alice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next is James Blackstone Memorial Library, page 51. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. So yes, good evening, Chairman Mooney and Board of Finance members. My name is Katie McNichol. I'm the director of the Blackstone Library. As you may know, Karen Jensen retired last June, and I was hired as the new director. With me tonight is Kathy Oxalita, our business manager, Janice Kochanowski, treasurer and trustee of the Blackstone Library back there, and Matt Roth, part of our finance committee, is here tonight too. Thank you for this opportunity to present our budget for the 2024 fiscal year. I do have copies of the library's line item budget if you need one. I know it's going to be attached in this new software system, but I did have extra copies with me tonight.
I think we were.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're.
Fantastic.
We have that.
Okay. So Blackstone Library budget process starts with salaries, benefits, taxes, and health insurance for our employees, which is altogether our biggest expense at almost 80% of the total budget. Most of the other line item expenses are flat when looking at a year-over-year comparison. The amount we're requesting from the town is $1,700,340, which is an increase of $49,524 over last year. This increase is driven primarily from a modest salary increase and an expected rise in health insurance rates. For fiscal 2024, the library's total expenses are $1,905,726. That's a 2.96% year-over-year increase. The primary drivers of these expenses include salaries, which total $1,023,078, and is an increase of $18,540. We followed the town's directive for unaffiliated employees, increasing full-time rates by 2.25% and part-time rates by 2%. Employee benefits and insurance increased by $30,978, and that reflects some changes in staffing and an estimated 10% increase in the cost of health insurance. The materials of the collection line total is $105,000. That remains flat. Repairs and maintenance total $62,000. That reflects a slight increase of $800 and includes contractual costs for maintaining the library building and grounds. The automation and technology total $75,000 remains flat, and that reflects a reduction in staff user licenses that serves to offset contractual increases. And our development and fundraising expense totals $9,700, reflecting a $1,010 increase year over year. And this line is offset by income from fundraising events. On the income side, there are several sources, including the town, program operations, contributions, development and fundraising, and other grants, plus the draw from the endowment. Program operations total $20,500. That reflects no change. It no longer includes income from fines, and it reflects income from copier and printing fees and rental use of the auditorium. The contributions total $60,000, which is an increase of $2,500, and that reflects a projected increase in direct appeals and slight increase from donations. And development and fundraising totals $25,500 with a slight increase of $375 for projected income from planned events, including our successful shredding and mini golf events. And the Town of Branford operating grant, which totals the $1,700,340. As I said before, that increase results primarily from a slight salary increase and the rise in health insurance rates. Continuing the commitment by town administration, the Board of Finance, the RTM, and the library to ensure a sustainable endowment, this year's withdrawal rate is commensurate with a 2.25% assumed inflation factor. This serves to create more predictability and less variation in the amount withdrawn from year to year and helps preserve endowment funds for the future. Accordingly, we are proposing a withdrawal from the endowment of $90,386, which represents that 2.25% increase over last year. So we're requesting 89.2% of the operating budget amount from the town, which reflects no change in percentage from last year. The balance will be made up by increasing our development and fundraising commitment, and the remainder will be withdrawn from the library's endowment funds. The total of all other expenses reflects slight adjustments made in accordance with spending last year and the first 6 months of this fiscal year. And then we are also requesting $30,000 for the sinking fund, which the town established 2 years ago for capital expenses. That requested amount is contingent upon needs for technology replacements or upgrades and building repair. And uses of that sinking fund will be subject to the town's regular oversight procedures. I'd like to recognize our business manager, Kathy, for her expertise in putting this budget together, as well as our treasurer, Janice, our assistant treasurer, Jack Thompson, President Beth Law, for their support and additional input. This is my first time going through this budget process, so their experience and advice has been invaluable. Our team also continues to work closely with First Selectman Jamie Cosgrove, Finance Director Jim Finch, and RTM member, Chair of the Education Committee, and ex officio board member Ed Preet, who all provide valued input into the budget process. And we want to acknowledge Board of Finance member Jeff Follett, who is an ex officio member of the board and represents the town's Board of Finance. Thank you for hearing our request.
Very nice presentation.
Thank you.
Good job. Questions from the board? Charlie?
It's one of the bigger drivers on your expense is the insurance. You deal about that? Like who's the carrier? Who's the agent?
For the health insurance, we're currently...
Yeah, the 30...
Currently with Anthem.
30,000.
Anthem, Delta Dental for a dental program.
Anthem Blue Cross?
Anthem Blue Cross for our health insurance. We'll get the rate increase in May, but based on...
Have you tried other sources other than Anthem?
Our broker regularly presents us with different options. This is the one that we've had for about 5 years, and it's been very successful, and it's always been moderate increases, but we've noticed it's getting less moderate as the years go on.
Who's the broker you use?
We use Stratford Health Insurance. Was recommended by Anderson Krause because they handle our business insurance, but they don't deal in health insurance.
Okay, and how was the increase in salaries arrived at?
The full-time increase was 2.25%,
Okay.
and the part-time was 2%.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, other questions from the board? Jim, there's no opportunity for them to participate in the partnership, is there?
There is. I think when the town was looking at it, because Blackstone used to be with us
Right.
probably about 5 years ago, as you mentioned, they do have that option to participate, I think. And I think at one time when you were separating from the town, I think it was mentioned, why don't you guys look at that? For whatever reason, I think you did look at it, I recall. And I think they found at that time a cheaper alternative. We had said the same thing to East Shore Health, because they were looking to separate with us as well. And in the case of East Shore Health, it worked out better for them. So it might just be the way their census is.
Okay.
So,
So you're welcome to take another look at it if that would save you some money.
Yeah,
That's an opportunity.
initially, when we broke away, it was because we were actually able to get better rates
Sure,
elsewhere.
sure, it's pretty volatile. And what's the value of the endowment?
$3,564,000 of business today.
Thank you.
that was Janice, the treasurer.
Yes, that's Janice, right?
That's
Yes, Janice.
Yes, I saw her, she was ready for that one.
Yep.
So,
Can I ask about,
Charlie.
so what's the limitations on the endowment? You can only take how much each year?
I think Jim can help.
Yeah, Charlie, I know it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but maybe it was a few years back. But basically, following the budget, I guess maybe 3 years or so ago, the library, in order to offset some of that, was basically taking a large draw on the endowment. And, in working with the board, there was some concerns, at least from the finance end, that is that amount being withdrawn sustainable? And so we had a series of meetings with the library, the trustees, and then ultimately that resulted in us coming to the Board of Finance. We had 2 hearings on that, and from what we had heard from the board was that, one, that the endowment, was a revenue stream that you wanted to maintain, right? And the other was that the library offered a value on that time, I think it was 85 cents on the dollar. So what we wanted to do was to look at that withdrawal strategy so that the endowment would always be there. Now, the library, as their investment advisors, uses the Andriel Group, as does the town on the pension side. However, we could not have Andriel Group run that analysis just on our direction because we're not counterparties to their agreement. The library is. So this was a very collaborative arrangement between the town and the library. And you may recall at the time the library was receiving some PPP dollars. We worked something out. We set up the capital fund. They wrote a check to the town for like $103,000 from the PPP money. And, through the work of the board, Ed Preet, Jeff, and obviously the first selectman, Karen and folks, we really got a better understanding of how all these pieces work together. And at that time, now again, it's, when anybody talks about where interest rates are and inflation, the model assumed roughly that you could increase the withdrawals from 2.25 each year, and that was supposedly to offset some of the inflation in the model at that time. Had we run that, if we ran that analysis today, it would be a higher rate. However, a higher withdrawal would lower the probability of success. I think we started with an initial withdrawal rate of about 3.5%, and then we assumed we'd increase it 2.25 going forward. I think we were roughly about an 80% success rate with that scenario. So that's sort of the history of it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, are there other questions with regards to the operating request from the board? Okay, questions from the audience with regards to the operating budget, sir? If you could grab a mic and identify yourself, please.
Representative Josh Brooks for the RTM. Just to direct a question for you, Director McNichol. So we heard from the other library. I'm going to get in trouble. And part of their increase was to get the part-time employees above minimum wage. Are you, with this 2% increase, doing the same, or would you need to, or are you already above minimum wage?
We're already above it. We're slightly above the state mandated minimum, I think it's $15.
Mm-hmm.
So this increase continues that.
Okay. Other questions? Peter? Just need a mic.
Peter Black, 3rd District, RTM. Just curious, because we heard that you'd gone to the partnership and that was one reason we were going to the partnership, is we were losing members from our plan, and now you're with Anthem. What was the increase for Anthem this year? Because I know the town had been told, we were hearing 20% with Anthem and 7% with the partnership.
This year's increase was, I believe, 8.1%.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, other questions on the operating budget for Blackstone Library? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the capital request, which is on page 47 of the section, the capital section. The request, I believe, is for $30,000, $10,000 for technology upgrades, and $20,000 for building and grounds contingency. You want to just touch on that?
Sure, that's our sinking fund request. We've developed a long-term technology replacement plan. So that would be the technology piece, and then the building would be for contingencies, things that come up.
Okay. Questions on this capital request? All set here. Questions from the audience? You're all set. Thank you.
Great, thank you so
Good
much.
job. Take care. Okay, next up is the Board of Education on page 55, and obviously the handout that was provided to us. Welcome, Peter and Hamlet and Don and Rob. Thanks for the help. Welcome. Hamlet, this is the last time you're going to be presenting?
Yes.
Yes. Congratulations, I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening, Chairman Mooney, members of the Board of Finance. First off, I'd like to thank those of you who were able to attend last night. As you all know, this is Hamlet's last budget that he's going to be presenting. I just want to start off with a couple brief comments, then I'll turn it over to Hamlet and to Don to get down into the details. Certainly we recognize that this budget is slightly different than the other budgets that Hamlet has presented to you in the past. The increase is higher than has been requested in the past. The current request is for a 5.2% increase for a total budget of $64,477,616. The primary two drivers behind that are our health insurance increase costs of almost $1.9 million. I'll say that again, $1.9 million. And utility costs of about $330,000. Certainly, we don't see this budget as a finished product. We are currently working for strategies to continue to reduce those costs, and hopefully, as this budget process goes through, we'll be able to see that reduction. With that, I will turn it over to Hamlet and Don.
Thank you, Peter. And yes, Joe, this is my last budget, and I want to take the opportunity just to thank the Board of Finance for throughout my tenure here of 13 years of presenting, supporting the Board of Education, asking thoughtful questions, and understanding that you have a very difficult task to balance not only the needs of the Board of Education, but as well as all the other services that are provided by the town outside of the board and the taxpayer, of course. And I mention that because I've always maintained that frame of mind when preparing budgets. During my tenure here over the past 13 years, we started with what I experienced, a change in demographics, and those change in demographics in the student population resulted in different needs that we needed to address in our population. As we sit here today, when I started, it was probably about 18% high needs. As we sit here today, we're north of 45% high needs. Let me define that. That's children that receive free and reduced lunch, children that are identified as special education, and children that are learning to speak English, that are TESOL students or L students. All of those populations qualify as what the state calls high needs. Special education, as a matter of percentage, has stayed steady, but our free and reduced population has been precipitously increasing, as well as our L population. That just requires different services at times, and it's something that we've been very, very mindful of. During my tenure here, we've also experienced changes in enrollment. You will see in your budget book that we've started to come out of a low trough in enrollment, and we are now starting to come back up. Despite that, we have been reducing staff. Just over the last 2 years, we have cut 13.1 certified positions between what's proposed in this budget, which is 5.3 certified positions, a reduction, and then what we did last year. So despite what some folks may say that we haven't made adjustments for that, we have made adjustments for that, but we've also reconfigured our staff. And let me talk a little bit about that, just from a context, and then I'll get a little bit into the numbers. We need more support services for our students. We need to maintain our class size. We need to preserve our extracurricular activities so that our students are engaged beyond the bell. This budget also contemplates all of the board's priorities, which I will state them here again. I said preserving programs, class size, student supports, professional development, and extracurricular activities. We also are supportive of all of our labor contracts, and as the chairman has said, we have been working very, very diligently since the inception of the budgetary process when we were working with our TPA, our third-party consultant for insurance, Lockton. While we've had opportunities throughout the years, every year we worked very collaboratively with the First Selectman's Office and the Town Finance Director, Mr. Finch. We would meet annually to see, is it a good time to potentially look at alternatives for our current self-insured model? Some years it looked as if maybe it would be, other years it did not. This year it certainly appears as if we needed to look at those alternatives very, very aggressively. No pun intended. We are trying to do that in partnership with a small p with our unions, and that work continues, and we hope to be able to deliver on that. And where we currently stand, our budget right now, the board approved a budget that put us at 5.8%. It's actually 5.82%. And what we hope to do is to be able to work with our unions and to avoid some of the costs that our current model would call for. We're looking at somewhere, probably anywhere between 18 to 20% in our self-insurance fund. And as the chairman had said, on the benefits page, you'll see, and we'll go through this, that's $1.9 million gross in benefits, gross in benefits. That gets mined down a little bit more detailed when it comes to just a health component, which is about 1.7, again, gross 1.7. When that all nets out, we're probably looking somewhere around $1.2 million of cost avoidance, should we be able to work with our unions to migrate to another alternative for health insurance, as opposed to being self-insured. That's a big picture, that's a big overview. What we'd like to do tonight is start with getting you into your book so we can kind of go through the key pages. If you turn to your budget book on page 6 of the budget book, I started to talk a little bit about this. Page 6 is the FTE count. I want to bring your attention to the certified, where it says certified subtotal. If you look at that, row and you look at 21-22, we had just about 303 FTE, certified FTE. This budget calls for 289, and that is a reduction in this year alone of 5.3 FTEs. While the request this year is certainly an outlier, given my tenure here, where we have been in the past, the confluence of health insurance as well as inflationary factors such as the chairman had indicated, $330,000 increase in utilities alone, as well as MERS, which is about $400,000. And then just in salaries alone, we're just about at 2%, which is almost $1.2 million just in salary increases alone. So we have this perfect storm that has hit us this year. So back to the medical piece, it was imperative that we look at alternatives, and that's what we embarked on, and that's what we continue to do. If you also look at this piece, a question that typically someone would ask me is, Hamlet, how many retirements does this budget contemplate? This budget was developed, there was 2 retirements that were submitted and processed, so those salary adjustments were made. Typically, when a teacher retires, they're at the top step, and we use a master's step 5 or step 6, step 7, for just a placeholder. That doesn't mean that we will hire that person at that step, but depending upon who that person was, if it's a physics teacher at the high school, we may have to pay a little bit more. If it's an elementary teacher, we typically can start them at the lower end. But that's a placeholder. Since that time, we have received 1 additional retirement. I mention all of this because for planning purposes, the delta is about a $30,000 savings. So we're looking at potentially already another $30,000 just in retirements that we can lop off of this budget. The other piece that is very, very important to keep in mind is the enrollment, and I had indicated that. In the back of your book, I believe it's page 57, if you want to look at it, 47, I'm sorry. You can see, we just take a count in December so that you can see what the enrollment was. You have the count from last December of 21 as well as December of 22. I just want to bring your attention to this because enrollment is not a stagnant number. In December, we were at 2,638, and that's students in our current schools. We have other students outside of Branford Public Schools that we are financially responsible for. As we sit here today, that number is 2,649. So just in a short period of time, we've added 11 students. That speaks to another piece. We have more ins and outs throughout the year than we have historically had since when I first started. In other words, kids that start in kindergarten and go all the way through the school system through 12th grade. We have children starting at all different times, and we also have children leaving the school district. We have many students that participate in the magnet program in New Haven because some of our high school is one high school, and New Haven offers many, many different programs. A question that I would typically get is, well, all these kids are leaving for private schools. Well, that's just not the case. We're at about 1.5% number of kids that actually leave for private parochial schools. Other kids just are going to different schools through the open choice program. So we have kids coming in, we have kids coming out. If you look at page 7, what I had indicated for salaries, and this is certified salaries as well as non-certified salaries, we're looking at an increase of $1.1 million, or 3.1%, the change. It is important to keep in mind that the 5.3 certified positions that we cut, that is $350,000 in salary that we reduced. So I'll just say that again. We're reducing 5.3 staff, and that is a reduction of $350,000 that you do not see on page 7 as a result of that cut. As you continue and you flip the page onto page 8, which is the detailed benefits piece, at the bottom at the total you see the 1.9 that the chairman referred to. That is the total of all of those lines. I just want to bring your attention to the health insurance line, which is 1.7 gross, and the alternative, the cost avoidance, if we do a successful migration, is about $1.2 million. The other piece that you see here is the CMERS, which is our employees for the state. We need to pay into their retirement. That is gross about $400,000 increase this year. The other piece I just want to bring to your attention here is the reduction in OPEB. We have a pretty significant reduction in OPEB, and we would also ask that if it is possible to further reduce that for consideration, given the totality of the request, if that's an area that is reasonable to potentially to further reduce, which right now that contribution is slated to be $102,000. So just between pages 6, 7, and 8, we're looking at almost $3 million just between salaries and benefits. And those are big numbers. Those are big numbers. So I'm going to stop there before I get into the other parts of it, because that salaries and benefits they're big components of this year's budget. And just to summarize, part of that, the salary piece, we tried to control through reductions, through cuts on the certified staff line, and we're looking at alternatives on the benefits side. So I want to just stop there, Joe, and just see if there's any questions before I get too further down and people forget what their questions may be.
Yep. The one question I had is, when you mentioned that the $350,000 for the 5.3 reduction was not shown here, what I didn't quite follow what that meant.
In other words, Joe, we have a headcount reduction, so those are positions that were cut in this budget. So we're not. It's again, had we not cut them, we would be adding.
So it's netted out here.
It's netted out.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, Charlie.
Yeah, but like you mentioned, we're going to miss you, by the way. Like you mentioned, we have an increasing student enrollment, and yet this year and projected for next year, we have like 13.1 less certified people. So we have a student enrollment going up, but we have less teachers. How does that balance out?
Well, first of all, I just want to be clear. We will have 13 less teachers than we had 2 years ago, not this year. When you go back to that page, on page 6, you look at what we had budgeted for in 21-22, so that's 2 years ago.
Okay.
And what I don't have here is the enrollment at that time. To answer your question more directly, though, Charlie, it's just not classroom teachers. Sometimes we think of teachers and we think of classroom teachers. We have to think of certified teachers. We have certified social workers. We have certified speech and language specialists. We have certified psychologists, school psychologists. We have certified instructional coaches. So these are different positions. As I said in my opening remarks, because of the needs that we have within our district, we need to configure the district differently. Some of the related services, what Mr. Ciccarelli has oversight of, social workers, resource teachers, special education teachers, school psychologists, speech and language specialists, pathologists, those are mandated services. Those are mandated services, and we need to employ those individuals. So it's really a combination. It's how we configure the staff. So that's how it's not just the classroom teacher. Yes, we can reduce staff, but we're also mindful of, at the same time, classroom size as well as ancillary and support staff.
Incidentally, what do you try to keep the classroom size at?
Our classroom size at the elementary level hovers right around between 18 to maybe 19. That's not consistent throughout. We have some classes that are 16, some that are 17. At the intermediate school, it starts to inch up a little bit. It's probably around 20 to 21. And then at the high school, it gets a little bit more nuanced at the high school because of the offerings. But we typically will run classes somewhere in the mid-20s at the high school. There are exceptions to that. I don't want, because you go out and speak to somebody in town and they might say, well, AP Latin, there's only 10 kids, something like that, Well, that's probably right, So, but to respond to your question, it's roughly right, it gradually builds up as they go.
Is the contract, let's say a max of 26?
I think the max in the contract is 28.
28.
28.
Just one last question. How about home study? Many kids?
The number of homeschool kids hit an all-time peak during the pandemic. I don't have that number in front of me, but I remember that it was north of 40 during the pandemic, and now that number is coming back down. We're probably less than 20 at this point.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Eric.
Two questions. In your letter, and we cover it you have it in the capital needs, is the security, upgrading the security cameras and equipment. And you're also looking at a 2 FTE increase in security personnel. So my first question, putting that in combination, the new security isn't sufficient enough to maintain security personnel to current level, or you don't have sufficient personnel in the school system? So,
well,
I gave you a multiple choice answer.
You did. Here, you always make it tough. You always make me be a sharp listener. So, I'm well trained with that, I think. But there's multiple parts to that. First of all, the security on the capital side. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Right.
When it comes to personnel, we did need to add. First of all, in the beginning of the school year, we added security guards, or not. I shouldn't say security guards. Security personnel at the elementary level, similar to what we have at the high school and in the intermediate school. For purposes of people that are listening to this and people behind me who may not know, our security guards are not police officers. They're not armed. They are there to assist in the order of the school. They facilitate things during arrival, dismissal, special events. They have tremendous relationships with our kids. And they really are our eyes and ears in schools. We added 8 of them at the elementary level, and 8 part-time, and those were moved into a grant. But we also needed to add an additional one at the intermediate school, and that's what you see here, I believe, as well as one for athletic events, for after-school activities. To answer the other part of your question, what do you need from a security guard perspective? I will tell you, in this day and age, I think we need to give consideration, and I would say this to the incoming superintendent in any sort of exit interview that the board provides, and I would say it here publicly. I think we need to contemplate having one person to be in charge of security, and not necessarily have that be site-based, so that we can deploy and use those resources appropriately, and preferably have somebody that has that type of a background to be able to ensure that we're following protocols and making sure that we're doing the proper training in this day and age.
Okay.
Did I answer all parts of your question?
Yeah, for now.
Okay.
For now,
C
we got more to go.
C plus, B minus, A.
No grade yet.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
He's tough.
I was hoping to pass fail, I don't know.
But anyways, we spoke about the paraprofessionals,
Yes.
when I met with you, and you said, look down at the bottom column, which is the other is 5. So The five are the unknown personnel that you would rotate during the year of what you needed?
No, those are-
It gives you that budget, you know?
No,
If you're
those other-
looking to have a surplus,
Those-
is it because that's a general category, other?
Yeah,
you know?
let me explain to what those are, all five of them, what they are. They're registered behavioral technicians, so they don't fall into any sort of collective bargaining unit. They're certified. They're not certified in the sense of teacher certification, but they're certified registered behavioral techs. They are trained and specialized individuals that work with students that have challenges with behavior. And that could be anything from a child that has some sort of a disability, spectrum disorder disability, to a child that is identified, or to even a child that is in the process of being identified as having the specialized needs. You know? So because they don't fit into one of these categories, they're registered, we categorize them as other.
Okay, thank you. My second question is a combination of staffing and the science program. We've talked briefly in the past about the science program that you've entered into with the grammar schools.
Yes,
And,
Project Lead the Way.
Yeah,
STEM.
and I could say from not being the one who attends it, but I have two grandsons that are both in the system, and they love the program.
That's great.
And, but are you contracting or adding personnel to that program?
We are contracting personnel to that program.
Why?
We had, to Charlie's question earlier, relative to numbers, we had 4 Project Lead the Way, or STEM teachers. We had 4 in that program, and one of them was itinerant, meaning that they would travel from school to school to ensure that all grades received it. Right now, the contraction is based on the number of elementary students that we have, as well as the new focus on reading, which we should always have had a focus on reading. But the effects of the pandemic on a child's ability to develop literacy, we will be spending more time in that area, mandated by the state, the science of reading. We're well positioned for that, but our STEM program, to your question, most likely will not go into kindergarten. We'll probably start that in grade 1 as opposed to kindergarten. We feel as if that will not adversely impact them whatsoever, and so that's the contraction of that program.
Thank you.
Yep.
Charlie?
On tuition, on page 11.
Charlie, you're skipping ahead.
Well, why did that go up?
Tuition goes up because we have students that attend schools. When I was talking about enrollment earlier, and I said that number of 26, whatever it was, that's not all of the students that we are financially responsible for. We have students that are educated in specialized schools where they set the tuition, and tuition primarily ACES, which is our regional area RESC. They have numerous schools, and then we have other schools, depending upon the needs of the child. They set tuition rates. The tuition rates have gone up anywhere between 4 to 6% in schools. ACES alone, Charles, correct me if I'm wrong, I think ACES' average was about 4.5% of all their schools. You know, but you know probably better than I do.
No, that is correct.
Okay.
Do these kind of kids fall into your quote of high needs?
Yes, these, again, children, our children that have specialized needs they're wonderful kids, but they have specialized needs, and the state recognizes that as being a high need area. That, as well as poverty, as well as students that are learning to acquire English. Those are the 3 categories.
All right, so they would fall into that, what, 40% of high needs?
It's about 45%.
Thanks.
Okay.
Joe, if I may.
Jeff, sure.
If I could just double back on the security portion.
Yes.
And bounce off a couple of Harry's questions. I know you said that the security personnel are, you know, your eyes and ears, Hamlet, but are they more as greeters? Do they have the opportunity to walk the campuses to look for vulnerabilities like prop doors and things that you mentioned in the new security software? What are some of their other activities that they do besides interacting with the kids?
Sure. You just named it. They walk the perimeter of buildings. They check for prop doors. They will, if they need to, escort people. So they're just not sitting looking at a video. They're pretty mobile, particularly at the high school and the intermediate school, with a smaller footprint at the elementary level. They are primarily in the front foyer, but they also walk around the building. And then when our children are outside during recess, that's a time where they need to be vigilant relative to the activities, not only that are occurring on the playground, but also in and around the playground, parking lots, suspicious cars, things like that.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll let you to proceed, if you would.
We're going to turn to page 10. On page 10, which is purchase services, I just want to bring your attention to our transportation contract next year is the last year of our current, it's a 5-year contract, Don? Mm-hmm. It's our last year of a 5-year contract. We're preparing the bid specs for that. We use Transportation Services, TSA, I believe it's called.
We're going out to bid for transportation consultant.
So you heard it here. We're going out to bid for our transportation services. But it is a 3% increase per contract. But you'll notice in the book here, when it talks about transportation and you look over, I want to say it kind of nets out to 2.3. But transportation that's 80,000 right there of an increase, contractual increase. We also have a rather significant increase on the line right below that, which is property and liability. It's another 64,000 to a base of 516, and that was primarily for cybersecurity. I am not going to attempt to talk about cybersecurity. I do know that we needed it. We were very vulnerable, and Rob, when he came first on board as our director of technology, really brought that to our attention and said, you really need to do something in this area, which frankly, I'm glad that we did. I'm glad that we did, and we need to continue doing that. The overall purchase services, though, when you go down the column all the way to the right, you can see how we are trying to control costs. If you look at the reduction in site licenses, the reduction in purchase services, the reduction in communications, the reduction in printing, as well as travel and other purchase services, that all nets out to an increase in purchase services of $5,000. So in a budget as big as the Board of Education, there's ins and outs, and that's something that we're very cognizant of. I do want to stop there just because cybersecurity is a new thing, and I don't know if there's questions about that, and Rob can certainly speak to that.
Questions on that topic? So, Victor?
Well, have you had attempted intrusions into the system?
No.
Okay.
No.
Good.
Are there vulnerability tests conducted from an independent source from time to time?
We have contractors that we work with to protect our system, and that's part of our regular maintenance. We moved to two-factor authentication this year, working with companies that will generate phishing tests and working on phishing education and also penetration tests and so forth. We're also looking at talking with different vendors to make sure that we're best working to protect our networks.
Yeah,
And back to the first question, have we had it? Nothing that's, I mean, there's always something that's coming.
There's something always tapping on the door.
Yeah.
Because I had found that some of the the carriers or their underwriters would actually perform some of those tests for the insurance companies and then provide it to the client. So might be something to look at instead of paying for it. Charlie, any question?
There must be health information on the kids in there, in the information?
In our student information systems? Yeah, we have all kinds of personal information that we look to protect.
Okay.
There's a lot of privacy issues.
I mean, the nurses input that?
That is correct.
Okay.
Joe, I got a question. Hey, I'm back on transportation.
Yes.
This is a comment just based on observation. I mean, it seems like there's less students on the buses and more parents driving their kids to school.
That's a very astute observation.
Well, a lot of main routes, I see a lot of activity, but I would imagine that you would consider in your future contracts that you would use smaller buses to try to save some dollars, and, I mean, it just...
We certainly, not only that, one of the things, because we're a shoreline town, we need to, there's type 1s and type 2 buses. We do need to look at the size of the buses, particularly for some of the roads immediately on the shoreline. Because, you know, the radius turns and things like that. So that is something that we would be looking at. And we certainly are working with our current provider, raising that same issue to see whether there's any way that we can compress some of the routes based on the usership, on the utilization.
Just a comment I put out there just to...
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and it's a changing time, you know.
I understand.
And you know, that's a mandate for us to be able to provide, transportation, and I hope legislatively that we are given more flexibility when it comes to something like that.
Thank you.
That's good. Okay. All right.
I wanted to mention page 11, but Charlie skipped ahead and asked a question on tuition, so I think we talked about that. Charlie, you know I'm only teasing you, because I'm going to miss you. When we go to, on page 12, this is, page 12 is our supplies. I know you're saying supplies, immediately you're thinking crayons, but what utilities is also something that is under supplies, and you can see that is the biggest driver. That's $330,000, and one of the main reasons that we have that number going up, one, besides inflation, we're feeling the full effects of Walsh Intermediate School being operated at full capacity now. We had some interruptions. If you remember, when we opened up that school, we opened it up in January. The world stopped in March. We didn't go back to school that year. Then we went back half of that hybrid model the following year. We were still doing some work. The community portion of the building was not being used to full capacity. So now we see that building, that building is being used the way that it was built. It was, you know, for a school, plus we have community spaces that are used pretty extensively. So we're seeing not only inflation, but the full effects of having Walsh fully online, operating both as a school as well as a community resource. And it's wonderful. I can't tell you how many people comment about that building and the way that it's utilized. So I think it's something that we as a community should be very, very proud of. The other, there's not much else when it comes to supplies. And one of the things I do want to just, I'm happy to take other questions, but one of the things I would like to have the Board of Finances leave with is where we've come from relative to where we started, with an incredibly high superintendent request, and just historically why that happened. Under the leadership of the chairman, we wanted to look at what are the things that are currently in grants and if we wanted to have them be funded locally, what would be the impact of that? So they saw the full effect, the full Monty of things that are funded by grants, and then they pared that down, and we ended up putting some things back into the grants. The board is keenly aware that there's about $2.2 million of different things that we are currently doing that are being funded by grants. I believe that's on page, correct me if I'm wrong, Don, it's 51. Page 51. If you look at that, yeah, 2.2 million. That is something that the board, with the new superintendent, will have to analyze and look to see, one, how will we fund some of these things, and do we need to fund some of these things? So that is something that at this point is a little bit premature to be looking at, but that was one of the reasons, probably the primary reason, why the ask initially from the superintendent was so significantly high. And where we landed at the 5.8 is reflected by, I think the board cut just under $1 million, you know, it's on that, and that is on page 48. It was $983,000, just under $1 million. So that's where we went from 7.4 to 5.8, and as I indicated, looking at alternatives for medical health insurance, with netted out at about 1.2, with each percentage point about $600,000. We would be landing somewhere, if we're successful, right around 3.8, and then any sort of minor adjustments based on retirements or anything that, such as what Jeff was talking about, working with our transportation company, if we can do some additional rerouting, as well as if we get any additional retirements. So I hope that captures everything and frames it, so that you have a good sense of not only the pathway, but as well as the drivers.
So if, on page 51, the grants are totaling 2.28, and those are annual grants, or those have terms to them, or are they at risk for future funding?
The ones where it says ARP ESSER, those will be sunsetting, as well as you have, you look at this recurring items affected by the sunset of ARP ESSER, that's pretty much all of that. That's all in ARP ESSER.
Okay.
And those federal dollars were designed as a response to what people were anticipating would happen from the pretty significant disruption that we had in the school district nationally. And it was an infusion. This is just an editorial comment. They put a lot of money up front, and it would have been nice to have had that money dispersed a little bit longer, so that we would see the effects, because we're still starting to see, we still see some effects emerging from that. But the sunset is right on the horizon.
For those 4 grants?
That's correct.
Okay.
I think
Any others, like
September
Effective
2024.
School Solutions, that's a federal grant, or?
That's being paid through ARP ESSER. All of these are ARP ESSER.
All of them?
All of them.
And so all of these are sunsetting in 24, 25?
Done. It's all of them except the ones, I think some of these sunset in this year.
The paraprofessional wage that
Yeah.
sunsets this year.
Yeah.
That's right, the heading says 24, 25.
Right, but there's one that sunsets this year, and that's the second one, the paraprofessional wage reopener that we did last year. Everything else is it September? Yeah, September 24th.
So this is an essential preview of next year's request?
I don't, I think it's premature to say that, and I really do think it's premature to say that. I mean, one of the things that
Why is Don smiling?
It's,
That's Jim smiling.
it's,
So he made you smile, is what it was? Okay.
Actually, what I was going to say, which probably may make you smile, is you had mentioned about an exit interview with the new superintendent. Promise me you'll talk to him about smoothing.
yes.
Because we always talked about smoothing the
Yes.
budgets and trying to
I
model
didn't know
it.
that
So
that
if you could always,
actual concept applied to the Board of Ed budgets.
well, actually, we've used that term
used that term
interchangeably throughout the
extensively.
years. So I know COVID is a little bit different, and the infusion of ESSER sort of was a spike, but if you can press upon that concept, that'd be great, so.
And to that point, I mean, we have, if you look at the historicals, it has been very smooth.
Yeah,
And
no, I
I really look at this year as a reset. It's something that we talked about, the reset year. And so I don't know if the way that we've been operating, smoothing for the last 10, for a better part of a decade, I think we can still employ the smoothing concept, but I think we need to look at the reset for what we will be smoothing. And I think that is yet to be determined.
Got it, thank you.
And that concludes the operating piece. I appreciated that you were asking questions while we were presenting, so that hopefully makes more sense to do it that way.
Thanks.
It only took me 13 years to figure that out.
Trial and error. Other questions on the operating side from the board? If we have additional questions, we'll obviously contact you or put it through Jim. So
Yes.
appreciate that. And questions from the audience with regards to the board's operating? I'll take, I think Josh had his hand up first. We'll,
Hi, Representative Josh Brooks, 2nd District RTM. If you could just so I know, or maybe I just don't pay attention enough. On page 10, line item 31 is purchase services. Under the major objective detail purchase services, and it was decreased by 124,000. What exactly is that? It just says purchase services, everything else is, named, but that isn't. And I just wanted to, I have a two-part, by the way. I have a next question after.
Because that substitutes intern to the in-house PD.
Yep.
That's what, in-house PD.
Sure. That's a combination of a reduction in the substitute line, which a portion of that was, again, offloaded to the grant, as Hamlet was describing, and also professional development services, which also is offloaded to the grant.
okay.
And then my next question, a little bit, maybe it's going to be a question and a comment maybe to the board. The security personnel, what are their qualifications? And is there, what is their qualifications? Let's just start with that.
Well, it's, the first thing, they need to be certified by the state, Josh. Can you hear me, Josh?
Yeah.
They need to be, there's a course that they need to take that permits them to serve as a security guard. That's run by the state, and then the qualifications of our current staff varies, but many of them, and not all of them, but many of them are retired law enforcement or corrections, many of them. And, I don't have off the top of my head, but that's kind of, the composition of the security guards that we have in our school district. But they all have that basic qualification required by the state.
And would you say that our compensation of said security is equivalent to the state average, so to speak? Meaning, I think it's an important issue with the security personnel piece of it,
Yep.
and as demonstrated that the board asked a lot of questions about it. So as you know, quality comes with compensation. The better compensation, the better quality. So my question is our compensation equivalent or better than the state average for said security personnel?
I don't know the answer to that question, and the reason I don't know the answer to that question is security guards throughout the state and school districts are very, very different. Just to our neighbor to the north, North Branford, there's security guards, plainclothes, armed. There's a price differential. You're going to be compensated differently when you're doing that type of work like that. So, and I'm talking about security guards. I am not talking about school resource officers. Those are officers, law enforcement, police officers. But security folks, for non-armed security folks, I would say that our compensation is competitive. I just don't know where we would land, where we are with the state.
Okay, then I won't have a comment for the board.
Okay, thanks. And from now on, you have to answer into the mic that way.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. I think you spoke loud enough, but just as a reference. For the next question, from Peter, yes, you have a question?
Yeah, I have two questions, actually. One is on the OPEB reduction there, and you were saying there might be room for a further reduction. Where do we stand in relation to the ARC on that? I mean, normally, on the town side, et cetera, we always try to make our actuarially required contribution. And if you don't have that...
Jim, you want?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you know, the Board of Ed works with us on that.
Okay.
They work together, you know, sharing information on evaluations. So basically, I share the information with the Board of Ed.
Okay. All right.
And the Board of Ed has been very good in terms of its contributions to OPEB, and going back to the days when it was like $475,000. So the Board of Ed's been pretty faithful on that, and I think you've even had slides in past PowerPoints about that. So.
Okay, I can take it up with you later.
All right.
My other question is on the grant-funded personnel. You've got a English language teacher, English learner teacher, $62,000, and a para at $29,000. Are those costs, are they fully costed there to the grant, including the health insurance, or is that just the salary?
You want to take that down?
That's just salary and payroll taxes.
Can we charge the grants for, or we run out of grant money anyway? Thank you.
We don't have the capacity in the grant at this point to charge anything further, such as health insurance.
Okay, thanks, Peter, and thank you, Don. Other questions with regards to the operating budget for the Board of Ed? Okay, if not, then we'll move on to the capital items.
Thank you.
Are we going to follow you in your book? Is that the?
Yes, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Neal, and Mr. Neal and Mr. Covey will walk us through the capital.
That's on page 55, Don? Is that where you're going to go, or?
It's actually, it's called C1.
Okay, so.
Right
That's
after
actually,
the
they're
page.
looking at Catherine's presentation. Catherine's.
Yeah,
In the back of this one?
They have their own in their book.
All right, I stand corrected.
But they did use our software for capital.
Okay.
Yeah.
See what oh, I see it, I got you.
Read the page 50.
Got it. It's actually page C1, yeah, okay, got it.
What's the page?
It's after that, it's called C1. You have to go flip a couple pages. Okay, yeah, that's it. All board members are on board, okay.
The first seven items are technology requests, so we'll let Mr. Covey describe them.
Sure.
So the first item, the $50,000 school technology, 21st century AV, that's equipment that we really fortify, maintain, expand things in the classroom. So as things evolve, for example, recently we made some purchases, used the money for keeping our panels. There's a substantial number of panels in the district, the display panels, and the screens themselves last much longer than the operating system, so we made some improvements to keep those panels working and going. So it's that kind of instructional classroom, student-focused equipment in that 50,000.
Okay.
We have the lease authorization for student devices. This would be for an elementary lease. As you know, we have leases of Chromebooks, elementary, we have Walsh, and then we also have high school leases and teacher laptop leases. But this particular one this year is for elementary devices, and we have seen some inflationary increases in costs with the lease. We're still working and debating or getting numbers with the company. I had a discussion with them yesterday to finalize the exact details. Office admin computers, these would be computers that are not included as part of the teacher laptop lease. So we use these for the office staff computers or administrator computers, like I said, that are not part of the teacher laptop list. We have the integrated school security platform. This is the platform that basically would bring together all of our systems that are that we use as part of school security, including doors and cameras and badging, our guest badging system that when people arrive at the school, and this system would brings that all together. And that's the 645929. And the last technological piece is security cameras and equipment. And you may ask, well, if we're spending that on the integrated system, why do we have the 10,000? That is for those instances that occur that are non-warranty or where a camera is added to give better coverage where we identify a need.
So this 645,000, this is for a security platform?
It's platform. It includes cameras, replacement of cameras, like 314 cameras, I believe. The licensing and the support. The cameras are 10-year warranty for the actual equipment, but it includes licensing and cloud services, which would enable us to reduce maintenance and continue operation of our servers. Like I said, it brings everything together, gives a far higher quality, faster response.
So where would it be located? Is this like just a, you've got servers, you've got equipment, who's going to watch this?
Who watches the servers or the cameras or? So what happens on the cameras gets stored up in the cloud. It's through a variety of American-based servers and data systems in this country. So that's where.
This is for all schools?
Yes.
So it would be brought, so it would be, and who would be monitoring this? If you're bringing everything together at the same time for.
So it's a combination. We have school administrators, the security personnel, facilities, whatever we need to. There's alarm monitoring also that goes into this. So as part of this, when it all comes on board.
This would all come under you?
As far as watching the system, I'm just curious. I'm just
seeing how it's maybe you could describe how it would be implemented and who would be in charge of it.
So it goes through the technology. So I'm in charge for the maintenance and implementation of the system, but we collectively use it. It's like I said, school administrators will look to review footage, facilities, look at things that occur within the buildings. It has lockdown features to lock our doors. So it's all encompassing.
And this would be bid?
It's state contract.
State contract.
And PEPM contract pricing.
And what's the name of the application?
Verkada.
Verkada?
Yep. Verkada.
And where is it implemented in the state?
ACES uses it. Newtown schools use Verkada. I believe Brookfield
there's a number of other vendors in the state that use it.
And Joe, to your question.
Region 4.
Pardon, sorry, Rob. To your question, who's actually like at the end user piece? Our security guards our security guards have iPads and certain alert features. I'm not going to get into all the details of it, but essentially we have real-time information, like if a door is ajar, the door is propped. We know where the door is propped, when the door was propped, and who propped it, pretty much. And I had mentioned when I talked to Charlie and Harry, I misspoke when I said facial recognition. What I should have said is it's patterning. It doesn't have facial recognition. It's not storing anything like that. It's patterning. So that's different because facial recognition gets into privacy issues and other things. But it's a system that brings us up to date when it comes to school security. And we will no longer be having expenses with servers because it is cloud-based. And if you look back at previous budgetary requests on the capital side, we often were asking for dollars for servers. You won't see those dollars being requested to support this system because it is cloud-based.
And have you conferred with the police chief on this? Or
the police chief, I think, they use Verkada system, and
we haven't specifically directly had direct conversations with it, but we have shared. They have approached us. For example, there was an ask of whether our cameras picked up traffic outside one of our schools. Right. So we complied and gave them footage, and they were very happy with the quality of the footage, and they inquired in regards to that. And I believe they pursued Verkada. There's a Verkada camera on the front of Town Hall. So,
and so police would have access to this as needed?
Well, it's
as needed.
As needed, and it's IP-based, without getting into all the details of talking about the particulars of the security piece, but certainly in real time. And we work very, very closely with the police, as evidenced even by yesterday's event that we dealt with. At the intermediate school. So the system is behind, and Verkada was not part of that piece. That had more to do with a different system, but we work very, very closely with the police when it comes to things like that.
Do we have badging at the schools now, or is this something that will be new, and because of this system, we can enable it, and all schools will have badging?
You want to speak about visitor badging?
So we have two types of badging. We have staff badges that give access, so that incorporates into the system as well. And then we would have what we call visitor badging, but when you arrive, you enter into the system. Visitors are referenced to a sex offender database in real time, and then a badge with their photo standing there in front of the IP gets printed as a visitor. So it prints a badge of sorts. So those are the two types of badging in the system. And
is it specific to where, so I've worked in hospitals where it's very specific to where they can visit and it actually fades out so that we know that somebody's been in the hospital too long? Does that have that, any kind of?
No.
Okay.
Sounds interesting.
We've needed it.
So Rob, might there be any grants for this?
We're looking at grants to see what might be available.
Yeah. Great.
We're always looking for opportunities.
Sure. Other questions from Rob on the IT request?
Yeah, I just want to clear in my mind, but we now have somebody 24 hours watching a laptop, right, to see if a door is opened, and then they report it to the police.
I think that's a mischaracterization of that.
Yeah, that's not exactly.
That's not.
That's not going on.
No. So if we lock our buildings and they're alarmed, we have alarms right now. If the alarm is triggered, there are people that monitor our alarms. What we don't have right now, when the alarm is triggered, they call the police and say, an alarm is triggered. This system will say, an alarm is triggered, and because it's tied into the camera system, they'll be able to say, there's a person at the door, or something of sorts like that. They could see, and that, more information when they report an alarm.
All right, so there's nobody monitoring the cameras and the laptop 24 hours?
No.
No, it's just an
No.
alarm system.
The cameras, I mean, when we think about, school security, the use of video and cameras, there's a deterrent piece to that. There's also, usually it's post-mortem. In other words, it's after the event, post-incident, and it's looked at, and because it's cloud-based, people can go back. It's very helpful in the investigatory piece of it. It could be very helpful in real time also, depending upon what the situation is, because it is IP-based. We can access it remotely. The appropriate authorities can access it in a given situation, can make the, tactical decisions about that. That's not my area of expertise. Different life, perhaps, but not today. So that's a law enforcement piece. So it gives us a tremendous amount of capability, but I don't want you walking away thinking that, well, you look at the FTEs and it's like, is Hamlet hiring people just to sit and look at cameras? That's not what we do. Our security guards are interacting with staff, interacting with students, but also, Jeff's question, as they walk around, they can physically see something ajar, but if suddenly they get an alert that, hey, this door is ajar on the other end of the building, they need to go there. They know. So that's how the system is designed to work. We're not building Fort Knox either. I mean, our schools are still, they're very controlled in who gets in and who gets out, but they still need to be welcoming places. They're not prisons. And so it's a fine balance that we're trying to strike.
And not to belabor this, but this is for the full implementation, the 645?
Yes.
And that would include the contractor installing, testing, training?
Yes.
So it's probably a good portion of it is the labor to put it in as well as the cost of the equipment.
Right.
Because this is IP-based. Is there an annual fee that goes with this?
This would include 3 years of all the licensing and coverage and alarm monitoring and everything. And it does include the installation. And there's a good amount of swapping over cameras and.
Right. For all the schools, all the buildings?
Yes.
Okay.
The predominant schools that have the most cameras are Walsh and the high school.
And the high school, yeah. Okay. Thanks, Rob.
Joe, just one last thing.
Sure.
So you talk about door propping quite a bit. Do we currently have that notification now in our current system? So it'll be better in the new system?
It's actually, this builds into that system.
It builds into.
Okay.
It builds into
So we
that
were
system.
able to start to incorporate the doors already, and this is to bring over all our cameras.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, other questions for the IT person? Questions from the audience with regards to the IT request while we're here? So, thanks, Rob, on that. Do you want to proceed, Don?
Certainly. The line item number 8, facilities equipment, 18,000 is our annual request for replacement of things like floor equipment, scrubbers and buffers and ground equipment like mowers, that sort of thing. Replace them as they break. Moving down to Branford High School, replacement of unit heaters for $80,000. So these sit in the ceilings, and we've maintained them well. We've kept them clean, but they're almost 30 years old, and quite frankly, most of them are really noisy to the point where sometimes teachers are having a hard time being heard.
Don, what's the quantity about number of units you think on this? 102? And this will replace them, or this a portion of them?
As they go.
I got you.
Not all at the same time, but
Thanks.
Okay, moving down to Sliney School, $20,000 for interior painting. Now, of course, we're aware that we may be doing some things with Sliney, but the lockers in particular are beginning to chip and peel, and we don't want, not the kids would eat paint chips necessarily, but it's unsightly and just not a really good situation, so they need to be painted now. Moving down to the next page, boiler replacement. We talked about smoothing earlier, and that's what we have attempted to do here, spread out over 3 years. The cost of replacing the boiler Indian neck, which by the time we get to 25, 26, that furnace will be over 25 years old. So that'll need replacing.
Is that gas? Gas or?
Joe?
Currently dual fuel, those are only used once.
Yeah.
The door replacement. So we have more than 1,400 doors, interior and exterior, in the district. And you recall earlier this year you authorized a redesignation of funds from some capital projects that we hadn't used, and we put them into doors, and that allowed us to reduce our request this year by the amount of that redesignation. We have $95,000 per school for Mary Murphy and Mary Tisco. Those are, as I'm sure you expect, is to extend the life of the pavement there. We get on it now, it won't deteriorate to the point where we need to dig up and replace the entire parking lot, so that seems to be a good investment. Sidewalk repairs is for heaving, cracking, spalling, that sort of thing, just annual maintenance of our many sidewalks. And then you're familiar with our annual request for the fire code and ADA compliance. Many of those are driven by the fire marshal, who upon inspection may find things that we need to address, and occasionally we have some ADA issues for accessibility that we also need to provide. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Don. So total capital request is $1,522,854. We have additional requests, additional questions on this capital request from the board. Any additional questions from the audience with regards to the Board of Ed capital? Ed? Got one question coming up.
Thank you, Chairman Mooney. Just a quick question. We allocated last year $50,000 for an architectural study at Sliney. I'm a little hesitant to put another $20,000 into the school, but can you explain where that is? Has that been done?
I'm happy to take that. And, the short answer, I want to make sure I'm talking into the mic. The short answer, Ed, is yes. It was just presented to the board. We are awaiting the final written report, and once that report is received, the chairman has already mentioned to make sure that that is conveyed over to the town. And we took a similar tack when it came to looking at the school from a feasibility standpoint, similar to what we did to Walsh Intermediate School. Just looking at, long-range plan, should we invest in it? Should we renovate it? Should we, start brand new? So it was a high-level type report. But what this request is, nothing will probably happen at JVS in the next year or two. And what Don is talking about is, if you've been in that building, and we actually talked about maybe inviting some of the town officials to walk through the building, just to kind of see it. They're high school lockers, and the paint is chipping, and we got little guys, little kids in there. So that's really what it is. But answer the question, yes, it's been done, been presented. We're awaiting the final report, and then we will disseminate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Other questions? Tracy, you have to just grab a mic there.
Thank you. Tracy Everson, 5th District, RTM. It's not in this year's capital request, but I see in next year's, there's quite a significant amount. The town does sinking funds. Does the school district not as you did with the boiler, but these are for air conditioning at 2 different schools and window replacement. That's quite a significant amount in 24, 25.
Tracy, the, two things. We need to go, I don't know if I can, we need to go back in time a little bit. Probably about a year and a half ago, we were looking at trying to improve the indoor air quality of the elementary schools, and we had fenced off some dollars. I think it was about $1.9 million of our ESSER funds to do some of that. Then we received quotes. I think each one of them was about $6 million in each school, so we were going to be short. And at this point, there was not necessarily a commitment to match that, to complete the projects. And at the same time, we were seeing different needs emerging in our school, so we started to prioritize. So while that is still there, and we've talked about improving the indoor air quality at the elementary level, that's a pretty significant increase, and it's a pretty significant ask. And we have 3 schools. 2 of them, we probably would be able to do it relatively easy. The 3rd school, which Mr. Preet was just talking about, we would not be able to do it easily. And then we would have a situation where we would have 2 schools potentially air-conditioned and a 3rd not. And I think it's more conversation needs to be had about that relative to, how will we tackle that issue around indoor air quality. I view it as an indoor air quality issue, not just cooling it off and when it gets hot. Sliney gets hot. Of all the 3 schools, Sliney probably gets the hottest on the 3rd floor. And, so I hope that answers your question.
Do you do sinking funds, as the town does, to buy like fire apparatus? That's a significant. I'm sorry. Do you do sinking funds, as the town does, for significant budget items, like a fire truck?
Right.
It's spread out over years.
Right.
These are big numbers, not in this coming year that we're talking about, but in the next year going out.
Sure.
So maybe I could step in to help.
Yeah,
you
because
too.
we have a compressed timeline now for.
Yeah, and so if you look at this as well, Tracy, that at least the estimated or the potential funding of this was debt. And so a large amount of this, the way it's categorized here. So ordinarily with the large items that come to the request for capital from the Board of Ed or other departments are put into the capital plan overall, that usually if it's a large amount would encompass us issuing some type of debt for it or something like that. So that's how we would look at that, evaluate what the request was and know that it wouldn't necessarily be funded through the operating or their capital request, but rather we'd consider it and then fund it in a different manner. Jim, you want to provide a little more information on that?
I think you answered that part very well. The other thing that, and the board is probably better versed in the statutes than I am, but my understanding is that Board of Eds can't carry funds over. So
that is correct.
The structure of a sinking fund is somewhat forbidden in the Board of Ed world. Now, having said that, there is some benefits to that, and Don mentioned smoothing. And on some of the other purchases, a few years ago, we looked at, and we, working closely with the Board of Ed and Hamlet, Don, and I think Donna Monroe at the time, had basically worked on a technology plan. So like if you look at the budget, you'll see roughly $350,000 going into a sinking fund for technology, $115,000 from the town and $235,000 from the board. So there are some areas where we actually do that, and then we have short-term leases. To kind of use a personal finance analogy, the sinking fund does work well on smaller reoccurring items, kind of like a Christmas club. I remember the days as a kid going to South Laurel Savings and having a Christmas club. The larger projects are more like a reverse Christmas club. You borrow money and then you pay it off over time, and I think that's what you were referring to as the debt. So, I mean, that's sort of my 2 cents. I don't think the board is statutorily permitted to do some of the things that the town does, so they would have to put that on the town side. So.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Other questions on the capital request for the Board of Ed? If not, I had one question on your C4 presentation there. I was under the understanding that Mary T. Murphy was built at the same time as the Tisco School. So I don't think that 1954 is the right date.
Is Mr. Carmel still here? We'll have to check that.
Because the high school was built in 54. I think that was built in 1960, just for, you can check that. Because they're sister schools.
Yes,
Brother
they're
sister
identical.
schools.
They're identical.
Just a trivia, that's all. Okay, so thank you for your presentation, and we will see you Monday.
One comment,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, please.
Sure.
I'd just like to thank the superintendent in two ways. One, for your previous service to our country, and more importantly tonight, for your 13 years to our children in Branford, as I'm losing my voice tonight. And you're probably happy I don't have any more to say. And for that, I give you an A-.
Gary, I appreciate that, and as a retired Marine officer, I'll go home and do 20 push-ups. And then take some Advil and get a heating pad, all right?
Thank you.
You take care.
Thank you, Harry, for
It's been an honor.
for those kind words to Hamlet. I think the entire board is behind Harry, and best of luck in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck.
It truly
Good luck,
has-
Hamlet.
It truly has been an honor of my lifetime. It's truly a privilege to serve, and it's something that my parents instilled in me, and I believe in it. So,
All right, sir. Thank you, and thank you, board members, and Don and Rob. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Okay, so we will conclude the public hearing portion of the fiscal 23-24 budget requests and move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is the fiscal 23-24 American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA recommendations. Jim, you provided a letter to
Yes.
the board. You want to briefly go through those?
Yes, and it's easier to do it briefly this year because we've gone through this process last year. So essentially, we were following the same process. You've heard over a series of nights various requests from departments, and this ARPA plan is to use some of those dollars for some of those requests, and in that case, that would basically be integrated with some of your budget decisions presumably. And so this is what our recommendation is, so that when you have your deliberations on Monday in terms of recommending a final budget, that you might take some of these things into consideration. In many cases, we're basically augmenting existing projects. In some cases, we're replacing projects that were requested. And so, and then in others, primarily what you heard with the basic needs in the counseling center, that's more of a glide path where and we talked about smoothing earlier, but we try to taper that off over the next couple of years. So this is something, an added resource you have based on a recommendation of myself and the first selectman, and so.
So this provides a potential funding source for the budget request capital items that total the amount of $2,115,000.
Yes, some of them are requests and some of them are add-in additions to requests.
Got it, okay. So we'll take these into consideration under our deliberations, our individual deliberations, and as well as on Monday when we meet again. Are there any questions tonight with regards to this, or we can field any questions over the next several days if need be? Fair enough for the board. for now, with no other work, no other items to come before the board tonight, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
The motion has been made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.